Okay, so here we are again on another one of my question and answer videos, and this is the first part of what will be a brace of videos where I get to talk about beer. I mean, let's be honest, this whole question and answer series is really just an excuse for me to be able to talk about some of the things that I enjoy that under normal circumstances I don't get to talk about. But I want to talk about beer. And a couple of questions were asked which were relevant to this. And I've printed the questions out. Unfortunately, as you can probably see, I may as well not have bothered. I printed them out so small, I don't think Ant-Man would be able to read them. Obviously in his ant form. Otherwise that wouldn't have made much sense that it was Ant-Man if he was just normal size. So I ended up writing them down underneath anyway. So I may as well just not bothered printing them out. These were the questions. Hold fast 1979. Favourite thing to brew, and have you ever brewed mead? Bear in mind I brew beer. I've had a sort of a break from brewing now for about 8 years, and I'm getting back into it. But I've brewed since I was about 18 years old, so nearly 30 years off and on. And then Pippa Trip, what style of beers do you like to brew? What styles in particular do you fancy? What do you think of the emerging American styles, which is a particularly interesting question there. Okay, so part of the homebrew thing, I want to treat you to a little bit of an extravaganza there. We're going to do some filming downstairs. I'm going to show you how I'm dispensing beer now, or will be. I'm going to show you where the brewing's taking place, how I'm storing it, and do a few things like that. But I'm not really ready to do that now. But I want to tie in some talking through about beer, talking it in with those questions about what I like to brew and what I like to drink, and American styles. So tie all that in together and take you on a little bit of a journey. Bear in mind, this is only my opinion, right? As I see things as they've panned out during the course of my life with regard to beer. I think beer, certainly in the UK, but I think beyond that, is actually in quite a good place right now. Which is a strange thing to say, because like everything that has that kind of cultural aspect to it, that's seen as part of our heritage, it's always seen as constantly under threat. And I'm sure there is still an aspect of that right now. But truly, I think there's probably never been a better time to go out there and explore the world of beers for one reason or another. We have access now to beers from all around the world that we just didn't have access to in the dim and distant past. And some of the things that we'd lost a few decades ago, I think we're clawing back, and we have clawed back some of that ground. Okay, so that journey then, I think in the UK probably starts in the 60s and 70s. And in some ways, it is probably a peculiarly UK-centric problem, which is that one of the things that distinguished beer and the consumption of beer, the public consumption of beer especially, was the business of cask ale, which is one of the things that I suppose in terms of beer defines the United Kingdom. Wherever you go around the world, most beer it's dead beer, effectively. That is what it is. It is a dead product that you are buying. And I don't mean that to be offensive, but that is what it is. It is filtered. It is pasteurized. It is a sterile beer product. Now, that doesn't mean that it is a bad product. In fact, you could say the same thing about Scotch. Here is a bottle of Scotch I brought up to show you. And this is a fine bottle of Scotch. It's an old bottle of Scotch, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. It's a Glenfarclas 25. And what that number means on it, this is a single malt. It doesn't mean that it's from a single cask of Scotch. What it means is that of the casks that this was blended from, they've all come from the same distillery, and that the youngest one within that blend is 25 years old. Not 25 years old today, it was in that cask for 25 years. And that's the important point, because with regard to whiskey, it effectively remains live while ever it's in the cask. While ever it's in that wooden cask, it's maturing, it's changing, it's evolving. Once you take it out of that cask and put it in the bottle, then the clock stops. It doesn't become a bad product, but it's a dead product now. It doesn't change, it doesn't evolve, it just stays the same. It could have another 25 years in that bottle. It might get a bit worse actually from now on, but it's not really, that's it. It's had its maturation now, and it's kind of a dead product. And it's the same thing with most beer. Most beer is pasteurised and filtered, and it's a sterile product. But in the UK, we have this thing called cask conditioned beer. You can get it elsewhere in the world, of course you can, especially in bars that are attached to a brewery. Then they may produce their own beer and keep it live. But what cask conditioned beer is, it hasn't been filtered, it hasn't been pasteurized, it is still alive in the cask. The yeast is still there, and it's still fermenting away on those residual sugars, the dextrins and the sugars. They're a little bit harder to ferment. It's still working on those sugars when it arrives at the public house, the bar where people will be buying the beer. And that presents certain problems, because when a cask of ale arrives, the clock is ticking. It is put up on stillages on an angle, and then a day or so before it's due to be served, a spile will be driven in, and you can alter the kind of spile to allow different amounts of air in, but you are allowing air now into contact with the beer, you're allowing it to breathe, and the clock is ticking, and there is only 3, 4, maybe at most 5 days before that beer spoils. It has to be served in that time. It needs a lot of looking after. Quite honestly, it's a lot of fucking about, and not to put it too bluntly, and the big breweries didn't like that, so they wanted to serve beer in the UK the way it's served everywhere else. Now, don't misunderstand me if you're not in the UK. We serve a whole array of keg, lagers, bitters, ales, ciders in the UK as well, but I would say at least every other pub has one or more cask beers. There are some chains such as the JD Wetherspoon chain, which is one of the biggest pub chains in the entire country, that specialise in serving an array of cask beers. So this is still a big thing, but at a time in the 60s and 70s, the breweries were trying to get away from this, and they were trying to produce pale ales and bitters in the same way as you would produce a Pilsner lager, and just sterilise it. They were trying to pasteurise it, filter it, stick it in a keg, and put it under carbon dioxide and serve it under the pressure of carbon dioxide, which is not the way you serve a cask conditioned ale. The point of allowing the cask to breathe is that effectively, if you go in a British pub, you will see what looks like a very large faucet handle that is then pulled, and that is using what is called a beer engine, which is effectively a positive displacement pump with a cylinder to pump the beer, draw the beer out the cellar and into the customer's glass. There is no pressure pushing the beer up the pipe, well, other than atmospheric pressure. Obviously, there is no carbon dioxide pushing it up the pipe. It is a very, very different way of carrying on. The end result of that is that the traditional beer styles were demolished, because you ended up to have the pressure to be able to push the beer up from a cellar required too much carbonation, and the carbonation kills the taste, as well as the fact that you've pasteurised the beer, which alters the taste. And it all looked like it was going in a very, very glum place. And an organisation called CAMRA, the Campaign for Real Ale, decided to label our traditional beers Real Ale. They come up with that moniker. And decided to try and save what appeared to be dying quite a rapid death. And on the face of it, it appears that CAMRA has done a very, very good job. Real ale is still on the go. Cask beers are still on the go. They're not growing in quantity, but then drinking in bars is reducing in quantity, and so that is obviously contracting along with it, but it is still a vibrant thing. They are still well available nationally. You can walk into most public houses and still buy cask conditioned beer, and I think CAMRA takes a lot of the credit for that, but I question whether that is actually the case. I think in actual fact there would have been a swing back to it anyway. Because I think what was going on with those breweries was part of a larger phenomena. From the breweries' perspective, they wanted it easily. They wanted to be able to put that beer, sell you the same product. It was a crapper version, but they're not bothered. They weren't really bothered at the time. The whole time in the 60s, let's be honest, we weren't bothered about anything. We would take beautiful British towns with lovely stone, old buildings and architecture and build shit next to them, wouldn't we? We didn't care. Everything looked shit from the 60s and we're kind of embarrassed. What were we doing now? What were we doing with town planning? What were we doing with everything? Back in the time, we just thought if it's old, it's crap. Whereas I think we have a slight more appreciation of that now. And that transposed into everything. If you went into a British supermarket when I was young, in the 70s and the 80s, they were full of crap. It wasn't just the beer was crap, but the cheese. If you wanted cheese, it was cheese. There was cheddar cheese, there was red Leicester, and that was about it. It was crap. If you wanted bread, there was white bread, there was wholemeal. An exotic loaf of bread would be a loaf of granary bread, for crying out loud. And this is the way that things were going. But things have changed across the board now. You go into a supermarket now and it is a bewildering place. It is a store unlike any store in the history of the British Isles now. You can buy these products from all around the world. You can buy these artisan products. You can buy these products that are from small producers that big it up about how beautifully they have been made, that make a feature of it. The people who are producing things now and the people that are retailing them realise that there is a market in this, that they can catch our eye, that we may have just gone in to buy a loaf of bread, but when we see this Belgian speciality sourdough loaf, right, it might taste like crap for all we know, but we've never seen one of those before and we will give it a go. They realise that there is a market for quality, for variation, and they seem to have bought into it in a big way. And this has been a marvellous thing, I think, for beer in the UK. You go into a British supermarket now, and it is unlike anything you had ever had at any time in the past. Of course, in the past, at one time, the products that you could buy were of a better quality. We'd gone through that period where we stopped caring about quality and it became crap. But at no point, even when we had the quality, did we have the array of goods from all around the world. We now have an array of goods and of styles of goods from all around the world. When I was a child, a pizza was just a sorry-looking, doughy thing with a bit of cheese and tomatoes sort of spread on it. And now they actually look like a pizza is supposed to look like. You can get them freshly made with bits of rocket and all kinds of fresh bollocks sprinkled all over the top. That was unheard of 20 or 30 years ago in the United Kingdom. And in terms of our own beers, our own ales, our own produce, you can buy the quality now. Supermarkets are stocking local produce, they're stocking quality stuff. And that has made a world of difference now. So this is kind of where we're at now. And so what I want to do is as a bit of a homage to all of that. I'm going to have a beer. As I talk to you. We can share a beer. I'm going to actually do the drinking and the tasting and the enjoyment part, and you're just going to kind of watch me. So maybe it's more of a kind of torture than anything else. But I wanted to choose this particular beer because it fits into a lot of the questions that were asked, having given you the background that I've just given you. It's by a brewery called Northern Monk. It's called Newer World India Pale Ale, 7.4% rocket fuel in a can. But listen to this. This is the first thing. Unpasteurised and unfined. This is a fresh product and should be experienced as such. Unpasteurised and unfined beer in a can. This is the first of the preconceptions that a product like this shatters, I think. Certainly in the UK, we come to associate keg beer and cans with crap. as if there was something intrinsic about putting something in a keg that made it crap, rather than a cask. And by a keg, I mean a vessel that's carbonated artificially and is sealed, hermetically sealed from the environment, rather than a cask, which might look similar, but it's got a live product in it and you allow the air to go in before you serve it. And cans versus bottles, right? It was always a sort of unwritten rule that if you wanted a quality beer, you'd buy a bottle of beer. It would be higher quality. Cans were always crap. But it seems that really the only reason for that was because that's how the brewers felt about it. They would only ever put crap in a can. They would never put anything decent with a can. I had a book which became quite famous in home brewing circles, the Camera Guide to Home Brewing, such that it went out of print and copies would go for almost £100 at one point, over $100 on eBay for that book. Here is this book. Here is my copy from 93, I think, 1993. This, you can see I've got sort of notes and all kinds of bits of paper and that stuck in it. Still a great book, lots and lots of information on brewing beer in that book. But one of the things it said in that book was actually, just as a side note, so many little sort of nuggets of information, but it says that actually canning a beer is a really, really good way of keeping a beer, in many ways a better way than keeping it in a bottle, because it keeps all the light out. There really aren't particularly any disadvantages with a can over a bottle, and I never bought that. Much as it made logical sense, I couldn't tally that up with the fact that beer in a can was always shite. Right, there was no such thing as good beer in a can, same as there was no such thing as a good bitter or ale in a keg. It was always overcarbonated. It had that, when you overcarbonate a bitter, the beer that the beer can't take, it has a nasty sharpness to it, a sort of burnt taste to it, even if the beer itself, if you take that carbonation out, doesn't have, because carbon dioxide gives that kind of taste. So that's the first thing that things like this are smashing now. You can get good beers in cans. I'm going to pour this into a glass, actually, and the glass I'm pouring it in is a Brewdog glass, which is an interesting brewery that's sprung up in the UK that's having really, really good success selling their products, selling beers in public houses, at bars, and also in cans. And they produce good products. But the interesting thing is they don't produce cask ales. They're producing a range of ales, but they're all kegged. But they're still actually damn good. So that shatters the second illusion. It's interesting this. I don't know a lot about this beer. What I do know is it pours quite cloudy. I almost wonder if this is a canned version of a bottle conditioned beer. It's actually cask conditioned, that it is still live in there, and that there is yeast, and that is part of what is giving it this cloud. I'm not here to do a beer review, but I want to discuss this beer because it impacts on a lot of what I feel about the beers that I brewed, and also talking about American styles and what kind of styles I like in beer. I said there's a world of beers out there that you can sample now. Never a better time to do it. One of the great things about beer, I think, is that the cross-pollination that has taken place around the world with innovations in different things. It was British brewers, I think, that were amongst the first to produce pale malts and produce pale ales, and then it was taken on board on the continent. Pilsners would produce pale lager malts. A lager isn't a pale beer, by the way. Lagering is a process of slow maturation, fermenting at a low temperature with a yeast that can stand being at a lower temperature. It's a longer, slower maturation at a lower temperature. That's why it's slower, because it's at a lower temperature. It isn't necessarily a pale beer, but we've come to associate it with that Pilsner style of golden beers. That's a cross-pollination. But the cross-pollination that's interesting here works two ways. This is calls it an India Pale Ale, but really this is a British brewer producing what is an American take on an India Pale Ale. What is an India Pale Ale? There's some dispute, but the style sort of guide is based upon at least the apocryphal take of what an India Pale Ale is, even if it isn't true, and I don't know exactly how true it is. But it kind of reads like this, that the British were brewing pale ales, and the British that were living in India as part of the empire, they wanted some beer. It wasn't very easy to brew over there. And so we started shipping it across. But beer doesn't take to travelling that way. Certainly not in the cask condition days before we were filtering and pasteurising it all. And what they found is that the beer would keep better in the casks if they brewed it a bit stronger, because the alcohol provides a protection from the beer spoiling. And also that's why hop beers were hopped in the first place, because the astringency and the acids in the hops provide protection, because a lot of things just can't live under those conditions as well, okay? But the yeasts that brew those beers can, so it gives them an advantage, and it gives a longer lifespan to the beer. It also balances out the maltiness of the beer. But they were putting more hops in them. They were a hoppier, bitterer beer. So that is the standard. It's like a pale ale, but it's a little bit more alcoholic and a bit more hoppy. And even if that isn't the case, that's exactly what these IPAs were that were shipped out there. These pale ales that were shipped to India, these export ales back in the day, that is how they are viewed. And so what you have here is effectively a British brewer paying homage to an American take on what is an American take of what was originally an English style, of English pale ales and English India pale ales, which is, I think, is kind of quite a wonderful story, really. And it's created what is kind of quite a wonderful fusion drink when you look at a drink like this, because what you have is what the Americans have done with this is that they've taken some of the facets of Pilsner lagers, which is the sharpness and probably the greater attenuation, so there's less sweetness in there and you have a slightly drier taste. They've taken those aspects of that, but then put a load of hops in it. Right, probably using a top fermenting yeast, but putting a load of hops in it, which you don't have in a lager. Lagers are not hoppy. Lagers traditionally are not many, 15, 20 IBUs. International bitterness units, they're not very bitter drinks. So what they've done is they've taken the greater hoppiness of ales and bitters and India Pale Ales and applied them, but without the sort of rounded estuary sort of style that you would have with that. Instead had the drier, sharper taste of a lager. And on top of that, taken these new strains of hops that are more citrusy, right? You can tell it, they've got the resiny characteristics that you would have of some of the hops like Goldings that you can dry hop in the UK, but taking it a stage further. This isn't the most citrusy. You can get these hop varieties like Citra now, which are just, it's almost like somebody's put a slug of lime juice in the beer that you're drinking. I think this is mainly Chinook or something along those lines. I don't know if it even says on here what hops are used. Simcoe, Mosaic, Chinook. That's the kind of hops that they've used to create that particular brew. But it's a marvellous example of all those things fusing together, I think, and creating what is actually a really nice drink. It's a refreshing drink. It has the refreshing side of a Pilsner lager, but it's got bags more taste. It's much more challenging. And some of these American drinks that are coming out now, I remember when I was a kid, American beer was not as a kid, as a sort of 20-year-old, American beer was a joke. It was crap. ASB, American Standard Beers. They were brewed to a standard specification, which was crap. So it was universal crap, effectively. Of course, there were a few small producers that bucked the trend and made decent beer, but that was not the norm. You have these big breweries, of course, Anheuser-Busch dominating them with their Budweiser, and it's crap. And now, the same as has happened in the UK with these craft breweries cropping up, America is awash with these craft breweries making wonderful brews. They care about what they brew. They want to make something that challenges you. And what a marvellous sort of reflection on the human spirit that is, that we went through a phase where the producers thought they could just sell us shit, and that's not true. That actually we do want something that challenges our taste buds. We do want something that's a little bit more advanced. We do want to move on and try different tastes, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think that it's consumer pressure and demand that's actually swung things back in this kind of favourable way. So I have a lot of time for these new American styles, and I think that it's kind of wonderful that that's now influencing, certainly back in the UK, I don't know the rest of Europe, but certainly back in the UK, there are a lot of producers like Brewdog, like Northern Monk, who are taking what Americans have done with hops and with new styles of beer and actually brewing them themselves. It's kind of all gone full circle. And to go full circle in this video and tie up what I was talking about with the questions that were being asked, it goes full circle for me, because the interesting thing is the style that I've brewed myself the most has been a pale ale, but a very hoppy pale ale. I started from a recipe which was really, really simple after trying lots of different recipes, which was just to buy the very best pale malt that I could buy, the freshest, best East Kent Goldings that I could buy, and brew the most basic pale ale that you could buy, that is just pale malt and Goldings hops. And I'd always chuck some in at the end. At the end, I'd chuck them in usually in the fermenter towards the end of fermentation. I'd chuck a load of extra hops in and create a beer which was much more bitter than the pale ales that I could buy. Actually, this isn't particularly bitter. It's got a lot of hop taste and a lot of hop aroma, but it's not especially bitter. But the beers that I would be brewing were pale ales, but they were very bitter, but also had a great hop aroma. And the wonderful things about these styles that are coming out of America, yes, some of the hops are more citrusy. I'm used to a more resiny, piney, sort of resiny taste to the hops, because that's the kind of hops that I'm using. And I still probably prefer that to the overtly citrusy hops. But they're very much coming round to the kind of beers that I enjoy, that I was brewing for myself out of preference. And so that's very edifying that the world of beer, in some ways, is coming round to things that I've created and enjoyed for myself. Okay, that's it for this video. I will be doing a video, as I say, on actually brewing beer. I did one about 8 or 9 years ago where I actually brewed the beer and I walked you through a brew day. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk a bit about why it's a good hobby to have, why it's good to have a hobby, why it's a good hobby to have, why it's a craft, why it's a skill, why it's something to be excited about and to consider. I'll show you a little bit of my equipment. I'll show you a little bit about dispense setup, because people have asked about some of that. So I'll do that. But what I want to end this video with is just to go back to what I said at the beginning. If you enjoy beer, and who doesn't? You must be mad, right? If you don't enjoy beer, go and see a doctor, right? Something wrong with you. If you enjoy beer, there has never been a better time, I don't think, to be able to go and explore, because it's all available for you now. It's all available for you. It is in every way. As a home brewer, you can buy all the ingredients now. You can brew just about any beer from around the world. You couldn't before. And it's the same if you want to buy some beer. You can go into a large shop and they will have a dazzling array of beers from all around the world, of styles, and it's a wonderful fusion of those new styles that you couldn't buy before, those new craft styles from small producers, but you can still buy those traditional styles from around the world, and even the ones that you seem to be dying out or they were just getting crapper and crapper, that's been walked back a bit now because the producers realise actually we need to compete. If we're making, unless we're making bog standard bollocksy lager, which is kind of where it got to. You could have Foster's or Castlemaine or Carlsberg or Carling, and it's all the same crap. It may as well have come out the same fermenter, to be fair, right? It's not like that now. Go out and explore. Buy something different. Go and buy a version of the kind of beer you like with a twist, and go and buy something totally different. You may surprise yourself. You may find that Belgian Trappist beer that you've never tried before and you've always wondered what it's like. It's absolutely blows your socks off. Gorgeous. Give it a go. Okay, that's the end of this video. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and if you'd like to watch my videos in the future. If you'd like to support my material, I'll leave you the links in the footnotes. Okay, cheers, thank you for watching, bye for now.